We are honored to welcome Jack Zenger, not only one of the most respected experts in leadership development, but also a longtime partner and friend of ours at Group P&A. Today we'll be talking about leadership, employee engagement, and the lessons that Jack have learned through a lifetime of experience, real practice, and human connection. Okay, Jack, I would like to know, since you started researching leadership, what is the evolution you have seen in leaders?
Well, what's happened over my lifetime, which has been about 93 years now, it began with leaders being expected to be experts and know everything, and to play that role, and to be comfortable being the one who would make all the decisions and to whom people would come and ask for their opinion and advice. And I think what's happened in the last few years is that we've recognized that there are lots of good ideas among the people that are in our organization, and leaders are learning that they should really take time to really respect those people and those opinions and to deliberately seek them out. And so I think the big switch has been to get away from being the expert and the person who's in command and control of everything, and instead kind of really being a person who's there to learn with them and to help orchestrate the organization getting better.
What is the most common mistake that you still see every day in leaders that they are still making?
The most common mistake I see leaders making is that somebody comes to their office or they meets them in the hall somewhere and asks them a question. And the common mistake is that they answer it. And so what I have been an ardent champion about is to say to leaders, when somebody comes and asks you a question, the best answer is, what do you think? You've been thinking about this much more than I have. So let's begin with, what are your views? And it's amazing how that changes the whole dynamic. And so I just believe we make a terrible mistake when we as leaders, someone comes in, asks a question, we give them an answer, they leave, we feel big shot. And often, the reason why you ask them for their opinion is that they know more than you do about this specific item, and it helps you make fewer mistakes. You make better decisions when you do that.
What advice would you give to a young leader that is starting now?
What advice would I give to an aspiring leader? It would absolutely be learn to ask for the feedback and the opinions of people around you. They have lots of good ideas that you probably haven't thought about. And so that ability to be more coachable, more respectful of the opinions of others, that would be the single most powerful message I would hope to convey to the young, new, aspiring leader.
Let's talk a little bit about your research, your work as a researcher. What leads you to start researching leadership?
As best I can recall, I was about 14 years of age, working for my father, who was a hospital administrator. And so I was doing really important things like mowing the lawn and filing x-rays and doing kind of menial jobs around the hospital. And there was one nurse that was a particularly outgoing, vivacious, charming lady, and I became good friends with her. And my dad came home one day and said, I offered to her the job of being head nurse over the whole hospital. And she said no. And I was absolutely flabbergasted. I could not imagine anybody turning down the opportunity to be the lead nurse in the organization. And I think it was from that moment I began to say, when people realize how much influence and impact one person can have on the organization, why would you ever turn that down? I mean, how could you possibly reject that opportunity? And that kind of began my interest in what is it that leaders do and how can they do it better? What can I do to help people be better for organizations and organizations better for people? I think that's when it all began.
What has been the most surprising finding of your whole career?
Well, the most surprising finding has been the research that Joe Folkman and I, my partner, colleague, did many years ago when we were looking at our database of what, about leaders and the 360-degree feedback for leaders. And we discovered that the best leaders were not necessarily perfect people, but that they were really, really good at a handful of things. So they were outstanding in maybe 4 or 5 competencies, but they weren't perfect. I think up until that time, we'd been operating on what I would call the medical model, which is you go to the doctor's looking for things that are wrong with you or that you're not doing well with, or just what's not going well and needs to be fixed. And I think the idea that maybe that's not the right approach. Maybe we should be looking at what do you do well right now, reasonably well? What could you do even better? And if you could take maybe 4 or 5 of those things and really elevate them to a really high level, you would make a big impact on the organization. That probably is the most profound discovery that we've made from our research.
Oh. And is the one you feel most proud about?
I'm really proud of the research that we've done just recently, just really in the last few months, that looked at how is it that organizations can get better so that everyone benefits, not just a few people, but how can you help the entire organization's leadership to elevate its performance? And we've discovered that when you train a number of leaders, and they indeed become better, and you train them using some powerful learning methods, and you have a number of people involved, that they get better. We've learned that they get better and the people who report to them get better. There's a trickle-down effect. It really cascades down. And I think that's because the people who report to a good manager see what she does, how she handles problems, how she handles interviews, how she runs meetings, how she makes decisions. And I think there's no question that the manager's influence on the people who report to them is powerful. What we hadn't understood is it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop with the individual or the people who report to them. It seems to radiate out into the organization. There's an extending, contagious effect that it has that lifts the entire organization. We had not known that before.
I totally understand why you feel proud about it. Yes,
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Have your own data ever made you change your mind about anything?
Well, absolutely. So the idea about the discovery that strengths were really the thing you should focus on. So again, for about 80% of the managers with whom we work, the best advice you could give to them would be find what you do moderately well, quite well right now, and see if you can elevate that to an even higher level. That was a pretty radical discovery. It wasn't, because up until that time, much of the whole assessment, 360-degree feedback, had been focused on helping people discover what aren't you doing so well? what detracts from your performance. Now, I need to hasten to say, for about 20% of leaders, that's important because they don't know that they are doing something that really does put them in the tank. And so for that small portion, working on their weakness is the right thing. But for the great majority, for the 80%, that's not the right thing. And that did change my mind. If I'm proud of one thing, it's been that through my career, I have been willing to make 2 or 3 major changes. In my early days as a student at UCLA in the States, they were very much involved in the early days of what would be called laboratory training, sensitivity training, key group training. And this was a very powerful movement, and it was really popular, and it did help some people. But I began to look at the research and I said, this is taking way too long. It's not very efficient. It doesn't really impact everybody well. And I came across this new idea about behavior modeling as a way of helping people to change their behavior. It was far more efficient, had much better research behind it. And so, I kind of gave up on all the key group training and sensitivity training and moved over to kind of adopting behavior modeling. And we used that as the basis for much of the early work that we did in an earlier firm that I was involved with. So I would like to believe that I'm always willing to kind of change my mind if there's new and better data.
What keeps you driving to keep researching today?
Someone said, I don't want to die if there's any music left in me. And I don't want to give up early when there's still some things that are exciting. So for me, it's the opportunity to kind of explore new ideas and find answers to new questions. It's to make the world a better place by doing research that's practical, that's actionable, that people can really use, and that will help them to have a more positive career and make a bigger contribution to their organization. That's what keeps me going, and I love what I do, and I believe that I constantly believe that my best days are ahead of me rather than behind me.
How do you think employee engagement has evolved in organizations, and why do you think the data continues to show such concerning results?
So my opinion about the research that some organizations publish about engagement is that they are overstating the case about the lack of engagement as a marketing tool. I don't think it's as dour or as in a bad condition as they would have you believe. Now, I do believe that employee engagement is a very powerful driver, and we have a whole bunch of data that shows that if you have employee engagement on the vertical axis and you have leadership effectiveness measured on the horizontal axis, that it's a perfect little stairway, that the least effective leaders have employees who have low engagement, and the most effective leaders have employees with the highest level of engagement. So if there's one thing we all agree on, and that is one of the powerful forces in the level of employee engagement is clearly the effectiveness of the leader. Now, is it the only thing? No, I don't think so. I think the team you belong to makes some difference. I think the industry that you're in and what you're doing, and is it a worthwhile social purpose that your organization fulfills? I mean, there are other things that impact engagement. But the single most important driver of engagement is the relationship you have with the person that you report to. So with that, we totally agree. And I think that a lot of what we're doing in helping leaders understand how their current behavior impacts the people that work for them can be a really valuable message. And you'll occasionally meet a crusty old manager or supervisor who's, I don't care what people think about what I do, and then if they see their data and they realize how negatively they are impacting the people that work with them, they change.
They will probably do something about it. Yes.
They will do something about it.
What impact do you think that leadership has in engagement? Based on your experience and data, is investing in leadership development a good way for companies to improve their engagement?
And absolutely. It's probably, if you had to choose one single thing to do that would elevate employee engagement, it would be to help your leaders become more effective. And what seems to drive engagement is that people feel respected and they feel listened to and they feel like their opinion really counts and that they can make a difference. And when leaders create that atmosphere and that culture, then their engagement goes up and the organization's performance goes up.
Okay, so let's wrap up with something a little bit more personal. I started to work in P&A in 2018, but you've been collaborating with us much longer. So I would like to hear your side of the story. How do you meet P&A and how is your experience working with us?
One of the things I'm not very good at is remembering dates and exact years that things happen. I don't remember exactly the moment in time when we met P&A and met Pablo, but it has been a long period of time. It was, I think, pretty close back into the beginning of our organization in 2020. 2002. The relationship has been unique. And it's been unique because your founder, Pablo Riera, was an unusual person, as you well know. He was a giving person, not a taking person. He was a connector, not a separator. He was very generous, and he was intellectually really curious. And he had the same values that we did. And so there was something that this was a mystical bond when we first met Pablo, and it didn't ever change. And so the relationship that we've had with your organization, you were one of the first, and you've been one of the most prominent and most successful of all of our partners, has been because of that shared bond of values and interests. Pablo was, on a personal quest to get better, and he went off and did graduate degrees, and we just really admired that quality in him. And so the relationship has been an unusually strong one.
We've talked about an advice you will give to young leaders, but I would like to ask you, looking back, what piece of advice would you wish somebody have given to you?
I wish that somebody had told me that it was really important to publish, to write and to publish. I stumbled into it to a degree, but I could have done more earlier in my career. And I believe that the way particularly people in our world establish any kind of credibility is to write and publish and have their views disseminated to the rest of the world. So I wish somebody had made that clear to me early in my career. I've ended up, writing and publishing a fair amount, but I could have done it earlier and maybe a little bit better.
Okay. How would you like to be remembered in these three roles: as a researcher, as a leader, and as a person?
Oh my. Okay. As a researcher, I'd like to be remembered as a person who produced very actionable, very practical, very useful research, who who wanted to research the important questions rather than the easy questions, who wanted to make a positive dent in the world, as Steve Jobs has said. So that would be how I'd like to be recalled as a researcher. As a leader, I would like to be remembered as a person who practiced what he preached. When I was young and getting started in this world, one of the jokes was that if you looked at all the leading gurus of leadership research and leadership, expertise, in their actual day-to-day practice, they were not really very well liked and very well respected, and they didn't always do all the things that they were telling everybody else to do. And so I vowed that, and don't pretend that I've done this at all perfectly, but I've tried to practice what I told other people was a best practice. How I'd like to be remembered as a person, I guess I'd like to be remembered as a person who didn't quit early and who believed that their best days were ahead of them and that there was still much more to be done. For example, I'm excited about this new discovery about how extending and contagious leadership is. But exactly what is it that happens inside organizations that has that new behavior transmitted so powerfully to some? I mean, what is it that's happening inside? And so that's just kind of very murky right now. I mean, nobody really knows. And I believe we could find some answers to that.
I hope so. And one last question. If you could share just one idea for people working in leadership development, what would it be?
I guess it would be that regardless of your philosophy of life or religious beliefs, I believe that we are sort of joining with whatever divine hand put us here and made us what we are, that we're helping that divine hand in helping people be better for the organization that they work in, and to help the organizations be better places for the people who work in them. We're teaming up with whatever divine force put us here. So it's not a trivial undertaking.
Yes.
It's a very important
undertaking. Responsibility. Jack, thank you. Listening to you is always a masterclass full of insight, clarity, and generosity. I'm sure that everybody who watched this will walk away with even more questions, more awareness, and hopefully more courage to lead with purpose.